Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give it a moment to let people in from the waiting room. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you guys so much for joining us this afternoon. We're really excited to be partnering with Coretelligent today to bring this Maintaining Compliance in a New Era of Cybersecurity webinar. I know it's a very relevant topic for a lot of our members in our community. So thank you to Coretelligent for being a part of this. Georgia Bio, we've been putting together a series of webinars over the past few months in a variety of topics. We've been bringing in a lot of our policymakers and different thought leaders to help see what we are doing in the world of COVID. And we are happy to partner with any of our members in other topics that you think would be relevant or timely. I also wanted to let everybody know that the Bio Digital Conference will be happening June 8th through 12th, and Dr. Fauci has been announced as one of their keynote speakers. So we hope that you take advantage of that week. It's going to be some great content going on. And with that, I'm going to head it on over to Alex.
Great, thank you, Christina. And for those of you joining us, thank you and welcome. As Christina said, my name is Alexandra Newman. I am the Director of Marketing here at Coretelligent. And for any of you who might be unfamiliar with Coretelligent, we're actually one of the nation's leading providers of managed and co-managed IT, cybersecurity, business continuity, and private cloud services. So we are absolutely thrilled to be here today to speak to all of you, as we really have a strong focus and in-depth knowledge base of working with life science organizations such as yourselves. We've actually worked with hundreds of life science organizations to simplify compliance while scaling quickly and cost effectively to really support their businesses as they progress and grow throughout the continuum. So we know you're often challenged with maintaining compliance and rigid regulatory standards, all while maintaining that rapid growth, right? But I don't necessarily want to take away anything from Dan's presentation. So at this point, I'd like to pass the baton off to Dan Atkinson. He is our solutions architect here at Coretelligent and has some great information for you all. Dan?
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that. And thanks everyone for joining, taking some time today. So we'll go ahead and get started. So real quickly, agenda topics. So we're going to talk about practical methods for maintaining compliance while scaling for growth in life sciences specifically. And then also wisely choosing technology partners. That's something a lot of our customers have obviously had to look at, and a lot goes into vetting and choosing the right partner, especially if you're in this vertical. A little bit about me. So I'm a solutions architect, which means that I work to advise our clients on the right mix of solutions to meet their business goals from a technology perspective. And I have been in IT for over 20 years. I've had multiple roles, from tech support to IT director, and now my role as solutions architect with Coretelligent. So diving right into it, I think we all probably have two, maybe three of the following. As workers in the life sciences space, we most likely all have intellectual property. That's a concern. We probably also have non-public information, so things like social security numbers for employees, and for a few of us who are dealing with patient records or clinical data, personal health information might also be a concern. So I like to always ask, what do you think it would cost your organization, when you think both in terms of monetary, whether that be fines and loss of productivity, but also reputationally, if that data was breached? And it's a scary thought. I'm sure we're all thinking about these types of things, and that may be the type of thing that even keeps you up at night, especially if you're involved in IT governance and especially if your organization is subject to any regulation or compliance requirements. So the good news is, there are ways that we can protect our businesses. And really, what it comes down to is a change in mindset. Kind of the old way of protecting data was much more focused on security-related applications, things like antivirus, firewalls, and so forth. And those are still critical today, but we're finding that they really aren't enough. To deal with the modern threat landscape, we need to adopt a comprehensive security assurance, as we like to refer to it. And that's a much different process. So rather than focusing on simply deploying technologies and walking away, now it's really more about continuous improvement and review. So it would include a regular review of what your cybersecurity strategy is. And this would be an iterative review that brings in knowledge from things like penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, and so forth. It also means conducting periodic security training for your end users to educate them on emerging threats. And also doing simulations like tabletop exercises to make sure that your team is prepared to respond should a breach occur. Now, not all of us have enough time or the knowledge to make these things happen, and that's where partnerships with a trusted advisor like Coretelligent can help you scale up, improve your security posture, and give you the peace of mind knowing that your data is protected. So we'll dive right into this a little bit more deeply in terms of the context of how it relates to compliance itself. So I like to distill compliance into 3 pillars. The first step is really to define the policies and procedures that are going to define the activities within the business. And those policies have to have senior leadership buy-in. They have to be supported at the executive level. That's key. The second pillar is to be able to architect systems and put those systems into place such that they can keep you compliant with your policies. So I'll give you an example. So maybe you have a written password policy that spells out password requirements. And then you also want to layer in something like maybe multi-factor authentication to ensure that somebody gets a second prompt to ensure their identity. So that would be a good example of needing to put a technical solution or solutions in place to comply with your own password security policy. So it's really important to define those policies to make sure that the people at the top of the organization understand those, and then to build the systems around it to make sure that you can remain in compliance with your own policies and adhere to them. And then I think the third, when it comes to regulated environments, is very important, and that is we have to be able to attest to it. So we have to prove that we are in fact living up to our commitments, and where we find deficiencies in our attestation. And are we recording that we provide new attestation that addresses or covers the remediation of those deficiencies, right? So if we find something that's not up to snuff, that we address it and we document that process. So with that, let's look at 3 common focus areas for regulatory compliance. I think most of these would apply to all of us, though some may not. But we'll start first with the FDA. And the FDA is the CFR Title 21, Part 11 regulations that many of us are compelled to. And this really describes effective controls around access, meaning access control. And that is, do we have defined roles within our organization are permissions set appropriately where, only people with a business justification for that access have it? Do we have strong passwords in place? Do we have strong account lockout mechanisms and the ability to be able to do a good offboarding for our employees or contractors if they move on, right? So such that we can be sure to reclaim any access that those individuals may have had. That's critical. As a part of this, we also need to think about our lab machines, if we have them, and how to balance the requirements of limiting system change to maintain validation on those systems, but also implementing the necessary security protections as well. And that could be as simple as maybe establishing unique policies and procedures for those lab machines relative to how logins are handled and how patches are installed, et cetera. With FDA, we also need to think about file sharing compliance. So, many of the guidelines we find with the FDA or any of the other regulatory frameworks, frankly, are best practices. So even if something doesn't apply to us specifically, it is still a best practice and something we can embrace. So, things like enabling audit trails and logs with, actionable alerts for when files are copied, deleted, or updated. Any kind of version control is also very important. And it's important to be able to have those features there so that you can readily make audit logs available to examiners in a regulatory sense. So I'll move on here to the HIPAA and HITECH compliancy. HIPAA, as you know, is related to folks who do have protected health information, and that doesn't apply to everyone. But again, it's good, good principles to put in place. And I think another important part to remember is that as we see things like GDPR and the California law, Massachusetts has a law now, New York has a law, we're going to see this become more prevalent where public health information and non-public information still requires quite a bit of safeguarding. In fact, HIPAA defines no fewer than 18 identifiers that have to be handled with care. And those are everything from names, social security numbers, email addresses, even biometric data. So the notion is we want to make sure that the systems, again, going back to the systems and policies that we have in place, that those are in compliance with the data protection. The HITECH Act, as you probably also know, really gave teeth to the HIPAA enforcement. And what it did was it included pretty significant penalties for willful neglect. So you do have to be negligent in this regard. But as you know, that's not particularly hard to do when you think about all that goes into something as common as employee or contractor offboarding. Again, making sure that access is quickly removed across all the applications and systems that person had access to. Missing something there could possibly result in major problems. So again, here, this is where a trusted partner with expertise in these areas can help own and manage these processes to ensure compliance. So moving on to our third and final regulatory area, and that's governance around how accounting systems and other systems are handling financial data. And that's around your SOX compliancy. So if you're a public firm, it only applies to public firms. But again, this represents a set of best practices for managing risk. And we find that for venture-funded life science organizations, adopting that compliance early in your progression can really help ease the transition if and when you go public. Or if you're acquired by a publicly traded company. These are things that are going to be part of the diligence process, during that the acquisition, and are going to be things you want to have in place if you do go public. So it's key here to have safeguards in place that prevent data tampering and protocols for responding to data breaches. So protocols meaning, having the policies and testing in place, doing tabletop exercises, and sometimes that involves utilizing a partner to help you do that. And finally, access to this financial data really must be carefully monitored and recorded. That is a guideline for SOX. And also preventing breaches or stopping a breach in progress is also key. Good perimeter protections to keep the bad guys out. And if they do get in, you want to reduce their ability to penetrate other systems. And you want to be able to limit the time that they're able to exfiltrate data out. And then, of course, to be able to do forensics on it as well. So let's talk for a minute about the specific areas that your attention should be focused when it comes to cybersecurity. So the first front is email and other corporate data such as databases and file shares. Email especially today is a prime target for today's attackers and can be a gateway to eventually getting into the internal networks, to deploy ransomware and so forth. So here, making sure you have the appropriate policies, systems, and services in place to protect these areas is critical. So things like, file auditing, data loss prevention, advanced email threat prevention like Mimecast, a solution like Mimecast, et cetera. And the second front is third-party vendors. So many breaches we've seen have come not from a direct attack, but from a compromised vendor, such as a third-party billing partner or IT help desk provider that lacked the proper protective measures. So, we really need to know how to qualify these vendors for contracts, and we need to continually vet them. Thirdly, we need to look at employee training and awareness. The statistics show that that about 60% of threat actors were internal, whether that be intentional or unintentional. So lack of employee training and awareness is the single biggest contributor to successful attacks. And simply conducting the training is really only half the battle. We can make people watch a video, make sure that they were there, and make sure they sign off on it. But we also need to test to make sure that the information has been retained and applied. And finally, the fourth front is SaaS, or software as a service, and public cloud. So obviously, there are huge benefits in moving applications and workloads off premise into the cloud, but that now becomes a potential exposure point. And you're trusting and relying on that provider to adequately protect your data. So it's critical that we vet these cloud partners, examine their security posture, and additionally verify that they are taking adequate steps to back up our data in some capacity to avoid data loss. So I promised to be able to give a bit of guidance on selecting a cybersecurity partner. And many of us don't have the resources in-house to manage this adequately. And if you're looking outside for that, here are 4 general guidelines to consider. And the first is compliance expertise. So there are a lot of MSPs out there, but they may not be well versed in regulatory and compliance requirements. And that's really foundational for any good cybersecurity vendor if they are to provide solid strategy and technical guidance. And the second thing to look for is breadth of services. So there are a number of organizations out there that do a very specific service or a subset of services. But ideally, you want a partner who has expertise in really all of the pillars that we discussed earlier, and has an established track record of success in delivering those services. The third point is the ability to scale. So small boutique MSPs or providers can possibly handle the load of an organization of your size today, but they could be outgrown in the event that you experience growth, either organically or through a merger or acquisition. So it's really important to choose a partner who is equipped to handle clientele of all sizes and who can grow with you. And then finally, superlative service. So you want a partner who takes your business as seriously as you do, and has the personality and the culture to engage with you not as a vendor, but as a true partner. So ideally, they should provide the same level of care and attention to all customers, regardless of their size. And they should be able and willing to share customer referrals and testimonials to show the type of service experience that you can expect. So hopefully this has been useful and informative from a compliance perspective. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Alex.
All right, great. Thanks, Dan. And it doesn't look like any questions have come in, but we'll leave that open for another second. Again, if you have any questions, there is a question box on the bottom, I believe, of your screen. There's a little icon, Q&A, and you can just type them in there, and we're happy to answer anything at this point, any questions that you might have. And I'll continue to kind of watch that if any do come in, but it looks like that is it for now. Thank you for that presentation, Dan, and thank you all for joining us. I know this is a topic we can all really learn from and build upon. If you'd like to continue the conversation with Dan or a resource here at Coretelligent, please send us an email, give us a call. I believe Christina will be sending all the follow-up materials to you shortly with that information. Again, we're happy to walk through this topic as well as a variety of other solutions we provide our client base. So at this point, I'm going to hand things back over to Christina. But again, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much, Georgia Bio, for having us today, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Christina?
Yeah, well, thank you, Alex and Dan, so much. This was very informative, and I know a lot of our companies appreciate it. I'm sure we'll get some other questions later on, and I'll be sending out the contact information to Coretelligent to everyone after this program. But thank you again. As I mentioned before, we have a lot of webinar series that we have been doing, and we're happy to partner with others, or if you have ideas or suggestions on topics that you would like us to cover, please send them my way. But with that, we will give you back some time for your Friday. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you at another event soon.